I didn't notice the first time he came in. That's the worst part. There's a version of me that wants to believe I'd know immediately if a stranger walked through my door, breathed my air, touched my things. I didn't. I went about my day, closed the laptop at midnight, brushed my teeth, and slept like the door between my life and everyone else's was a solid wall. In the morning, there were small differences. My living room window was open to the safety bar, which I almost never do because the building's old and the sashes slam shut in a breeze. A mug I swear I left by the sink was on the coffee table. I told myself I was tired the night before, that I must have moved it and forgot. I shut the window, put the mug in the dishwasher, and went to work. On the second morning, the smell hit me. Not a bad smell. Clean. Sharp. Lemon cleaner. The kind they use in offices. I don't own lemon anything. I'm a vinegar and baking soda person because my mom hammered into me that chemicals are an unnecessary expense. So the citrus hovering close to the floorboards felt like someone else's breath. I bent down and sniffed the threshold. Nothing. Just old wood. I checked the kitchen counters. Nothing. I told myself, maybe the downstairs neighbor was deep cleaning and it drifted up. I told myself a lot of things. That night, I slit the deadbolt, locked the chain, and wedged a chair under the knob. I laughed at myself for doing it. I wanted to believe the laugh meant I was being silly, not that the laugh was a thin sheet over fear. Around 3 in the morning, I woke to a soft sound in the kitchen, a steady, patient sound, like a cabinet door was being eased shut with 2 fingers. My body knew before my brain did. Everything inside me turned to ice. I didn't move. I kept my breathing as steady as I could and listened as someone crossed the squeaky patch by the fridge and paused. The chair under the knob hadn't moved. The chain was still on. The deadbolt still in place. I stared at the door from my bed and thought, there's nobody here. You're dreaming. And then the bathroom faucet turned on for a second and off, like somebody testing the water, deciding against it. I lay there and counted to 60, and then to 60 again, and again, until the counting was a rhythm that might hide the frantic thud of my heart. I reached for my phone as slowly as if it were attached to a grenade. No signal. Not because the network was down, but because I turned on airplane mode before sleep to stop the midnight pings from work. I slit my thumb and held my breath while the little icon spun. 2 bars. 3. Another sound. This one nearer the faintest scrape from the hallway. I texted my upstairs neighbor, Leah. Are you awake? Someone might be in my apartment. Please call me now. Her typing dots appeared like a lifeline. Then my phone lit up and rang. The sound of it, sudden and bright in the dark, snapped everything in the apartment. The scrape in the hallway froze. I let it ring into the quiet and then answered, pretending to be groggy and annoyed. Hey Leah, yeah? Is everything okay? What, there's a leak? Now? I stood and knocked my bedside table on purpose. I made noise. The kind of noise that says I'm not alone. I'll meet you in the hall, I said. Give me 2 minutes. I hung up and grabbed the small flashlight from the dresser and the heaviest thing within reach, a cast iron pan. I flipped the light on, opened my door, and stepped into the hall. Empty. Silent. The citrus smell was stronger here, a clean halo around my doorway. Leah stood at the top of the stairs in oversized sweatpants, hair in a bun, eyes wide. She held a mop like a spear. What leak? She whispered. There isn't one, I said. I needed an excuse. We listened. The old building sighed. Pipes ticked. Somewhere far off, a dog barked. My apartment door yawned open, and the dark inside felt like a mouth. We looked at each other and took one step, then another. My kitchen was fine. My living room was fine. The bathroom, the medicine cabinet hung open. A little puddle on the sink. just enough to reflect the ceiling light. Leah touched my elbow. I wanted to tell her I must have left it that way, that this was all a misunderstanding, something to roll our eyes over with coffee later. Then I saw the vent. It's one of those square floor vents near the baseboard that feed warm air in winter. The metal cover was skewed a 1/4 inch, just enough to notice if you were looking for it, not enough to catch if the light was wrong. The screws were slightly stripped. The line of dust around it was broken by finger marks. Leah followed my gaze and swore under her breath. We left. We didn't hurry. Running felt like bleeding in shark water, but we moved. I locked the door, and Leah held my hand as we took the stairs. In the hallway, we called the non-emergency line. They told us to call 911, which felt too dramatic and not dramatic enough. We called 911. 2 officers arrived in minutes that felt like hours. They checked the door, the windows, the fire escape. They checked the closets and the shower and under the bed. Their voices were calm, practiced. That calm made me want to scream. "Look secure," the taller one said. And then he saw the vent. He crouched, touched the metal with a knuckle, and glanced at his partner. "You get critters?" he asked me. "Sometimes mice in winter," I said. "But they don't use screwdrivers." He called it in. Another unit arrived with a maintenance guy from the management company, panting and unshaven, keys jangling like a chain. I watched them remove the vent cover and shine a light into the duct. The beam disappeared into a black rectangle that might as well have been an ocean. "Crawl space," the maintenance guy said. "Between floors. Old building. A lot of voids." "How big?" the officer asked. The maintenance guy shrugged. "Big enough for a person, if they're skinny and don't mind dust." They pulled out more tools. The officer told me and Leah to wait in the hall. Leah squeezed my hand until it hurt. I didn't tell her to stop. I expected noise. Scraping, a shout, a struggle. What came instead was a slow, collective breath, the kind strangers share when they see something that isn't their business and becomes it anyway. The officers backed out of the kitchen single file, faces wooden. "In there," one said. I didn't want to look. I don't know why I did. Maybe because not looking would have let my mind make something worse, and I couldn't imagine worse until I saw it. The vent was now a hole big enough to swallow a head and shoulders. Beyond it, a little cavern opened between my floor and Leah's. There was an old blanket, gray with lint, a plastic water bottle, a pile of protein bar wrappers, a small flashlight with a lens taped to a narrow slit, the kind you could press to a vent opening without the light spilling into the room, and a phone. Not mine. The phone was propped against the duct wall, camera out. It was pointed directly at the rectangle of the vent grid, as if my kitchen was a stage and the duct was the box seat at a theater. The officer used the tip of a pen to nudge the screen awake. The lock screen lit up with a photo of my hallway taken from floor level, my door, my shoes, the bottom hem of my coat. My mouth went dry. I tasted metal. They found more, slowly, like a magician producing scarves. A coil of thin rope, a cheap mask from a Halloween store, a bottle of lemon cleaner, a small spiral notebook with dates and times. Every Tuesday, every Thursday, Saturdays if lights off by 12. The officers asked me questions in a voice soft enough to belong to a friend. Did I ever give a copy of my key to anyone? Did I know my mail carrier? Did I have recent repairs done? The maintenance guy shook his head when I looked at him, offended and skittish in equal measure. He said only he and the super had master keys, and the super had been out with the flu for a week. They dusted. They bagged. They told me to pack a bag and stay with someone. Leah didn't wait for me to ask. She took my hand again and said, "You're with me." That night, I slept on her couch with the hall light on, and my shoes by the door. I didn't sleep. Not really. Every sound was a step. Every gust against the window was breath. Leah made tea at 4 in the morning and we didn't speak. There's a kind of quiet that only exists after the shape of danger has been measured. By noon, the management company had a locksmith change every lock in the building. The police set up a camera in my kitchen aimed at the vent hole, now screwed shut with new plates, sealed with a bright orange tag. I asked if that was enough. The officer's mouth did a thing I can only call a failure at a smile. "We'll patrol," he said. "We'll check footage. If he comes back, we'll know." I moved. It wasn't a decision. It was a reaction, like pulling your hand from a burner. I signed a too expensive lease on a building with a doorman, and elevators that actually worked, and vents that were tiny slits too narrow for anything but air. My friends said it was smart. I said it was temporary. I said a lot of things. For a while, the world got small. Work, home, the grocery store, my keys in a death grip, from door to car to door. I stopped using headphones outside. I stopped sleeping with the window cracked. I bought a motion sensor and a camera and 3-door wedges because security is a religion that requires devotion. A month later, a package appeared in my new lobby with no return address. The doorman handed it to me with a shrug. I carried it up and set it on my kitchen counter and stared at it as if staring could change its contents. It was light. It didn't rattle. I cut the tape. Inside, wrapped in a dish towel that wasn't mine, was a bottle of lemon cleaner. I didn't scream. There's a point you pass where your body stops advertising fear and holds it tight against the ribs to keep it from spilling. I put the bottle in a plastic bag. I called the number the officer gave me and told them what I had. They told me not to touch it. They told me someone would come. I stood by the sink and watched my front door. I watched it the way you watch a sleeping animal that could wake and bite. When the knock finally came, I jumped so hard I nearly dropped the phone. It was the officer from before. He took the bag and told me I did the right thing. He said they were still working the case. He said the crawlspace held prints they were trying to match. He said it like progress. It sounded like a shape without a face. That night, I dreamed I was back in my old kitchen. The vent cover was skewed a 1/4 inch. I crouched and put my eye to the grid. On the other side, the dark breathed. Not loudly, not like a monster in movies. Just the steady in and out of someone who knows how to wait. When I woke, the room smelled like citrus. I checked the door. I checked the windows. I checked the tiny vents I'd chosen specifically because nothing could fit. I told myself, the smell was in my head, that a month of fear had given me a phantom. I opened the trash cabinet to throw away last night's coffee filter, and there, against the back wall, was a folded square of a dish towel I didn't own. I didn't move. I didn't touch it. I stood in my kitchen and let the truth settle. Locks keep out the world you imagine. They don't stop the one that learns you, that maps the space between your rooms and your routines, that slides into the places you don't consider doors. I moved again. People say that's running. Maybe it is. But you can only share your air with a stranger once before you understand that fear isn't a thing that comes and goes. It's a person. It's a pair of lungs carefully matching your rhythm through a thin sheet of wood and metal. It's lemon on your floor when you don't own lemons. If you're lucky, you smell it before it speaks. If you're very lucky, you leave before it learns your name. Story 2. The Last Passenger. I drive nights because the city feels honest after midnight. People stop pretending. They talk. They tip if you listen. And the streets are emptier, like the whole place exhales. It was a Thursday, cold enough to make the windshield crackle when I turned on the defrost. I'd done 6 rides, mostly quiet airport runs and bar drop-offs. I told myself I'd do one more before heading home. Just one more, to justify the gas. The ping came from a side street off an industrial strip. Factories on both sides, their windows black. Chain-link fences buzzing faintly, as if the whole block had a heartbeat. The pickup name was Mark. 5 stars, 200 rides. That's the kind of thing that makes you relax a little before you even pull up. He was standing under a dead streetlight when I rolled to a stop. Tall, clean jacket, hands in pockets. He moved like someone who didn't want to take up space. When he opened the door, he leaned in and said my name softly, the way people do when they're trying to be gentle. "Yeah," I said. "You, Mark?" He smiled without showing teeth and slid into the back seat. "Yes," he said. "Thank you for coming all the way out here." The destination on my phone was across town, 22 minutes. He didn't say anything at first. That's normal. People live in their screens. But about 5 blocks in, he spoke like we were in the middle of a conversation we'd both been having quietly for a while. "You usually end around now, don't you?" I glanced in the mirror. Streetlights slid across his face and turned it to stripes. I said, "Sometimes." "Yeah. How'd you guess?" "Just a feeling," he said. "I'm sorry. Do you mind if we take a slightly different route? Construction near the highway." He leaned forward a little and pointed. "We can cut through by the yards and save a few minutes." He had the kind of voice you lean toward. Calm. Careful. It wasn't the detour that bothered me. It was the way he'd said my schedule, like it belonged to him. But I followed his gesture. The map rerouted with a soft ding. I told myself it was fine. You keep your rating by being flexible. We turned down a road I never noticed in daylight. One of those in-between streets the city forgets a place for pallets, dumpsters, broken forklifts. He kept talking. Not quite small talk. Not quite personal. "You like the night," he said. "Fewer people. More truth." He paused. "Your Tuesday nights are lighter than Thursdays." I watched the mirror. His eyes were on the back of my headrest. I said, "You take a lot of rides?" When he didn't answer, I looked down at my phone. The blue route line had changed again, a thin thread drawing us into a deeper pocket of warehouses. I didn't touch it. He hadn't touched it. The app sometimes recommends quicker paths when it notices your speed. That's all, I told myself. "The app is helping," he said. "I like how you always crack the window 2 fingers when the car gets quiet. You think it helps with the talkers. It does. They fill the air before the air fills them." I rolled the window up. My mouth was dry. "How long you been riding with me, Mark?" He smiled at the back of my head, like he could see through the fabric. "Long enough," he said, "to know you take your mother to the early clinic on Wednesdays and you don't like the coffee there, so you stop at the corner place with the green awning on the way. Long enough to know you hate the left turn at Maple because the timing of the light is stupid." The way he said hate made something prickle under my skin. I said, "We're almost there," in a voice that didn't sound like mine. "Not here," he said. He leaned forward and tapped the back of my seat twice, light as a metronome. 2 more blocks. Take a right, then pull in by the fenced lot. There's a gap. It's quiet. I slowed. 2 more blocks. The fence on the right was topped with new razor wire, bright as teeth. Past it, a narrow gap, where the slats didn't quite meet. He was right about that, at least. A place where a car could nose in, disappear halfway from the road. I imagined the view from above. A white rectangle swallowed by shadow. I didn't turn. I let the car roll past and tapped my hazard lights on. I said, "I need gas." Like that explained anything. Across the street, a station glowed blandly. A man in a dirty orange vest smoked by the ice chest. "That's fine," Mark said. The voice didn't change. Calm, patient. His hand rested on the door handle like he was already braced for a stop. He said, "We'll do it there." We pulled in. I parked too close to the kiosk on purpose so my door would swing open against it. The attendant looked up, surprised, then bored, then curious again when he saw my face. I sat for a beat, engine idling, staring at the LED numbers bouncing on the pump. Then I turned the car off and stepped out into the wash of gas smell and light. "Would you like a receipt?" the attendant asked. The way attendants ask when they want you to know they're watching. "No," I said. I watched the back door. It didn't open. Mark didn't move. "You okay?" the attendant asked. "Yes," I said. "No, I don't know. Can you just keep an eye on me for a second?" My voice cracked in the middle. He straightened and put his cigarette out like a man dropping a toy when the real work starts. I walked to the back door and opened it. Mark sat very still, hands in his lap. He was smiling that tight smile again. Up close, his skin looked thinner than it should. He was older than I thought. Maybe not old, but worn. His eyes were dark and flat and bright at the same time. I said, "This is as far as I go tonight." He looked at my hand. "You're shaking," he said, and there was something like admiration in it. He tilted his head as if I'd performed a trick. "You never used to shake. Please get out," I said. He glanced past me at the attendant. Then he looked up at the ceiling like he was listening to a radio only he could hear. When he spoke again, it was almost gentle. "You should check under your bumper," he said. "That's where people put them when they want to learn you. Magnets are quiet." He stepped out and stood so close I could feel the cold radiating off his jacket. He smelled like laundry soap and old carpet and something metallic. He didn't look at me when he walked away. He didn't hurry. He crossed the street without waiting for the light. For a second, he vanished behind a passing truck. When it cleared, he was just another tall man in the dark. I drove home with the radio off. Every red light lasted a year. Every car behind me was his. I parked 2 blocks from my building, then moved to another street, then another, afraid of being followed. Finally, in an alley with one working bulb, I knelt in the oil and gravel and slid my hand under the rear bumper. It found metal, a little rectangle, smooth as a pebble. When I pulled it free, it clicked softly in my hand. A tracker, black, warm from the road. I put it on the passenger seat and drove to the precinct. The officer at the desk listened the way professionals listen when they've heard everything and know some things still matter. He backed the tracker. He asked for the right details, the time, the place. He asked if the passenger had touched me or threatened me. I said no. He said that made it harder. Harder doesn't mean nothing, he said. And it was the first time that night I believed someone. At home, I changed every setting in the app. I turned off the show name feature. I stopped accepting rides after midnight. I switched my routine the way you switch hands when one goes numb. I bought a cheap camera for the dash and one for the back. I looked at every man in the rear view and thought of a vent in a wall. A week later, a new ping came in at 10:10. Name, Mark. Same photo, same 5 stars, same 200 rides. Pickup, the clinic where I take my mother on Wednesdays before dawn. I stared at the screen until my eyes hurt. I didn't accept. I sat in my parked car and watched the little icon pulse. Then it stopped. The request timed out. My phone buzzed again. New ride, different name, different photo, same pickup. I changed my number. I changed my mother's appointment. I changed the way I put my key in my door. The city is honest at night. That's still true. But honesty is a blade with 2 edges. It tells you what's there, and it tells you what can be. The last passenger isn't always the last. Sometimes he's a lesson you only have to learn once, if you're lucky. I'm still driving. I talk less, I watch more, And every time I turn the wheel, I imagine a hand in the dark, tapping the back of my seat twice, asking me to take a right where the fence has a gap, promising it's quiet there. I don't go where it's quiet anymore.